Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 340, True Blue Swablu. The episode begins with a massive storm taking place as a flock of Swablu and Altaria, some Hoenn Pokemon, were taking shelter in a nearby tree. Although the Swablu and Altaria were really struggling inside the tree as the wind was extremely strong and there was constant lightning. The frightened Pokemon were then all forced to leave the tree together as a lightning bolt hit the tree they were in, sending it bursting into flames. Unfortunately, there was one Swablu that didn't make it with the rest of its flock, as it was too slow. And the other Swablu and Altaria turned back to notice that they had left one of their kind behind and watch in horror as they hear a crash, which was the flaming tree collapsing, severely frightening the Swablu as it gets pelted by individual burning branches. It seems like Ash and the gang had experienced the storm as well, although it had cleared up by the next morning, and Ash and the gang were relatively unaffected by it because they were just walking through the forest. Although Brock soon revealed that they got so distracted by the storm last night that they ended up getting lost in the middle of the woods. Max suggested that they turn back and try and retrace their steps, but Brock stated his belief that they were so lost that even that wouldn't help. Regardless of this, Brock decides to continue on, determined to find a way through the forest by just walking forward. So he does so, stepping through several puddles that were made by the storm along the way. Although he eventually stopped to make sure that he didn't get himself even more lost, and also to take a breath of the fresh air that had arrived after the rainstorm. Eventually, Ash and the gang reached a fork in the road, and Brock stated that it was time to decide which way they should go, confident that at least one way would get them closer to Petalburg. Ash and the gang were super depressed that they had to make a decision, worried that they would get lost again as they slouched to the ground, with May complaining that she didn't want to have to make a decision, she just wanted to get home to Petalburg so she could get some rest. So she decides to leave it up to Brock to decide on his own. After a few minutes of thinking, Max asked Brock if he had decided yet, although Brock didn't confirm this, stating that he had no idea which way they should go, which just made Ash, May, and Max in an even worse mood as they began to fall down to the ground in dismay. Just then, Brock lifts Ash, Max's, and May's spirits by stating that he actually did decide which way to go after a little bit more thinking. Ash, May, and Max questioned which way this was, leading Brock to point to the middle path, hesitantly saying that going the middle path seemed like the best course of action, and this hesitancy made Ash, May, and Max worry even more. Brock could sense how worried they were, though, so he declared that they wouldn't go down the middle path yet, and instead take a break and make a camp to have lunch for a bit, so that Brock could have more time to think it over. Not wanting to be at fault for Ash and the gang getting even more lost, Ash, May, and Max were disappointed at first, just wanting to get to Petalburg, but they soon realized they were hungry, so they decided to agree with Brock that it was lunchtime, as Brock got his stew ready. And also sent out all of his Pokemon, with Ash and May doing the same so that their Pokemon could have lunch as well. So Brock sent out his Lombre and Mudkip and Fortress, May sent out her Skitty, Torchic, and Beautyfly, and Ash sent out his Corphish, Trico, Torkoal, and Talo, along with Pikachu, obviously. While Brock was cooking, he formally introduced his Lombre to the rest of the Pokemon, since they hadn't seen it in its newly evolved form yet. Although Lombre didn't say hello back, it instead just looked to the side, zoned out. Brock tried to snap his Lombre out of the current state that it was in, telling it to get busy and sniff for some water nearby that he could put inside his stew, as, once again, just like last episode, he didn't have any water on him. And Lombre did oblige trying to sniff, but it was too enamored by what it sensed, and soon enough, all the other Pokemon turned in Lombre's direction as well. Pikachu was the first one, aside from Lombre, having heard something. Ash noticed that Pikachu was acting kind of strange, and wondered what was up with it, but Pikachu didn't answer him, instead just jumping from his shoulder to go after what he heard. And Torchic also heard this, and together, Torchic and Pikachu went off into the bushes, and eventually pretty deep into the forest. And soon, in Pikachu and Torchic's search, they eventually come across a whole bunch of broken branches and debris from a fallen tree, the same tree that had fallen last night in the storm. And then they find a heavily injured Swablu, the same one from last night as well. And it was just then that Ash and the gang approached, and the Swablu became frightened by them. May didn't notice this at first, and instead just took notice of how cute Swablu was, while Brock took notice of the Swablu's wing being injured, obviously since the burning tree fell on it. Ash tried to get the Swablu to come over to them so that they could help it, but Swablu was too scared to move, so May suggests that Ash try a more gentle approach and go up to Swablu himself, but she ended up just doing this as she approached Swablu and crouched down to it, hoping that her womanly charm would be enough to win it over. However, May's attempts to calm Swablu down only resulted in Swablu using a sing attack, still afraid, which made not just May, but the entire gang fall asleep. Ash tried to warn May before they did fall asleep, noting that singing Pokemon, such as Jigglypuff, always had the tendency to make a person sleep, but he wasn't able to warn them in time, obviously. With Ash and the gang asleep, the Swablu tries to take the time to move and escape, but it only walked about 2 feet before the pain of its wing was too much for it, causing it to stumble and fall on Torchic, which woke it up from its slumber. And Torchic then notices Swablu, obviously, and the two of them begin to have a conversation, in which Torchic assures Swablu that they were all there to help it. So Swablu trusted Torchic and Ash and the gang now, being happy as Torchic went over to May and used to peck on her nose to wake her up. The pecking causes May to freak out in pain at first, but then she gets excited as she knows Swablu hadn't run away, and she tries to win it over again. and therefore realized that Swablu seemed to be more comfortable around her now. So she took the opportunity to pull out a super potion from her backpack and inform Swablu she would help it feel better, as she sprays Swablu with the super potion and tells Torchic to wake the others, which Torchic does by pecking them all, causing everyone to scream, echoing out into the forest, but regardless of the pain, they were awake. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the forest, a Nuzleaf heard the screams and leaped down from a tree that it was sitting on to inform its trainer, a Pokemon Ranger, Mr. Marita, of the screams. He had already heard them though, and he was wondering where the screams had come from and why they occurred, and decided to go with his Nuzleaf to investigate the source of the sound. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, Brock, Max, and Ash and Pikachu were still holding their noses in pain, angry with Torchic, but Torchic didn't care. It was happy with itself for doing as it was told and waking everyone up. Brock, even though he was in pain, then freaked out when he gazed at the Swablu, just only to see that May had bandaged it up like a mummy. And Ash and Max noticed this as well, and they were all very surprised, asking May when she would have had the time to bandage up Swablu, with May clarifying that she befriended Swablu when everyone else was sleeping, and added that she made it all better. But Brock stated that it looked more like May was just preparing Swablu for a tomb, which made May mad, saying that she couldn't take risks not applying bandages everywhere, just in case Swablu was injured in any other places. Brock was about to rebut this and state that it was important to only really focus on bandaging the wound, but before he could, the Nuzleaf and Miss Marita came out of the bushes. Ash and the gang and Swablu were startled at first, as they literally fucking jumped out of the bushes with just Nuzleaf coming first, and Mr. Marita immediately yelled at Ash and the gang and asked what they were doing on the preserve, thinking that they were doing something bad to the Swablu. Ironically though, Mr. Marita's yelling only makes Swablu more frightened as it hides behind May. Mr. Marita is still able to see Swablu regardless though, so he notices the immense bandages on it and comes to the conclusion that Ash and gang were merely just helping out the injured Swablu, and apologizes, introducing himself as Marita, the ranger of this forest, which was also a Pokemon preserve. Ash and the gang were relieved to not be yelled at anymore, and they were even more relieved when Mr. Marita offered to take them to his ranger cabin so that they could help out Swablu further in there. So with that, Ash and the gang went over with Marita to his cabin. Once there, Brock criticized May's mummy bandages once again and took them off, instead putting on a proper bandage solely on Swablu's wing so that it had more circulation in other parts of its body. During this, Ash scanned Swablu with his Pokédex to learn more about it, and then Brock grabbed a medicine bottle from his Lombre, which he had basically been using as a tray. Basically, he had put the medicine from his backpack on Lombre's lily pad so that he had a way to spoon it out, and that's what he did, as he took a spoonful from Lombre and told Swablu to take a sip, and it did so, and actually seemed to enjoy the medicine, which May was surprised by, complimenting Brock on how good he was at healing up Pokemon, with Ash commenting that it only made sense because he wanted to be the best Pokemon breeder there was, so of course he would be good at this shit. May then asked Swablu if it was doing good to confirm that Brock's treatments were working, and Swablu responded by smiling happily at her, making May glad. It was then revealed that Marita had went into his kitchen to get some hot chocolate for Ash and the gang, as he comes out with it and sits down with the rest of them, and while they all drank, Marita went into detail about what his job as a ranger in charge of the preserve entailed, stating that he had to make sure the flocks of Pokemon in the area, which were the Swablu and Altaria, were safe, explaining that they were very rare Pokemon, and poachers loved to come in and steal them a lot of the time. But he then added that poachers weren't his concern last night. His concern last night was a terrible storm that destroyed a lot of Swablu and Altaria nests, and a lot of the baby Swablu were separated from their parent, Altaria, including this Swablu. Hearing about Altaria for the first time, Ash uses his Pokédex to find out more information, and learns that Swablu and Altaria migrated every year, and Mr. Marita confirmed this, stating that they migrated through his preserve every year, adding that while some Swablu and Altaria stayed, some chose to leave. Marita then adds that this Swablu that they had with them was very young, so it had to be returned to its parent Altaria and its flock in general as soon as possible. May agreed, petting the Swablu to comfort it. Brock then got concerned, stating that Swablu wouldn't be able to get back with its flock if it couldn't fly and keep up with them because of its injured wing. And he and the rest of the gang expressed their desire to help out the Swablu with its wing and help it with its process of getting back to its flock. But after Ash and the gang and Marita's introductions, Marita had found out that Ash and the gang were traveling, and he didn't want to disrupt their travels, so he promised to take care of Swablu on his own and let it rest up and heal before releasing it to go join its flock. Ash did confirm, stating that he and his friends were on their way to Petalburg City, leading Marita to promise to give them directions. Ash asks specifically if Marita could give them directions to the Petalburg City gym, but this makes Marita realize that Ash and the gang were Pokemon trainers, and asks if this was true, with Ash confirming this. Marita placed down some Pokemon food for Torchic, Pikachu, and Lombre to eat, and stated that if Ash and the gang were truly Pokemon trainers with a lot of experience battling, then they clearly had a lot of experience with Pokemon outside their own, so suggested that maybe Ash and the gang should care for Swablu until it was healed. Ash was excited to care for the Swablu, agreeing to stay for a little bit, but May cuts in, saying she wanted to care for it, and suggests that they shouldn't just stay for a little bit, they should stay until it was absolutely better, and adds that they should also watch it fly back to its family. Ash and the gang agreed with May, although Ash only agreed to stay for the whole time until it was healed, if they were all allowed to care for it together, not just May. And May agreed to this, because at the end of the day, she just wanted Swablu to get better. Knowing that it would take Swablu a while to get better, however, Mr. Marita allowed Ash and the gang to stay at his place until it was healed. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was sitting on a tree on a singular branch together, just outside Mr. Marita's cabin, spying on Ash and the gang, and as well as Swablu. Team Rocket had never seen Swablu before, so James asked what it was, with Jessie saying that she wasn't sure, but it was cute, and she wanted to add it to her team. But Meowth interjected, explaining that a better use for Swablu would be to give it as a gift to Giovanni, and proceeded to have a boss fantasy, explaining why Giovanni would like Swablu, stating that Swablu's soft and fluffy wings and its ability to sing so well would help Giovanni relax and fall asleep. Jessie agreed with Meowth, admitting that Swablu would make a really nice pillow, which is one of the reasons she wanted it. However, her and James did think that giving it to Giovanni would be the best move as well, as they all began to have a fantasy together of Giovanni scolding Butch and Cassidy for not coming back with a great Pokemon like Swablu. And Meowth, of course, added that if Swablu sang Giovanni to sleep every night, then he would likely be less cranky and nicer to them in general, and would also be a better leader in general, able to make more conscious decisions. When Jessie and James also realized that they would get huge-ass promotions for making Giovanni happy, they all cheered, declaring that they were going to steal Swablu, imagining what they would buy with their huge-ass promotions. Meanwhile, back inside Mr. Marita's cabin, night had fallen by this point, and Ash and the gang were getting pretty tired, saying that they were either going to go to bed or they were going to go into the lake to wash themselves off and wake themselves up. So they asked May, who was currently taking care of Swablu, if she wanted to come as well, only to find her already asleep next to Swablu, coming to the conclusion that May must have passed out from the exhaustion associated with caring for Swablu. Max gently shakes May in order to wake her up and ask if she wanted to go to the lake with them. May does wake up, but she declines, stating that she wanted to continue to care for Swablu. Although Brock told her that if anyone needed a break, it was her, since she passed out from exhaustion, and offered to take care of Swablu for her, but May stated that she really wanted to still take care of Swablu on her own for now, knowing that she could do it, and assuring Ash and the gang of this. Ash and Brock commented that May must really care for Swablu, with May explaining that she didn't just care for Swablu, she cared for all Pokemon, and she couldn't bear to see Swablu injured. Max interjects, stating that May used to hate Pokemon, but May shuts him up, knowing that she didn't feel that way anymore, by covering his mouth. Max eventually got his mouth uncovered and admitted that May's mind couldn't be changed. Although when he compared this to how May couldn't get over one of her previous boyfriends and she couldn't change her mind and focus on another guy when she got rejected, May shut him up by covering his mouth once again before he could say anything more, and tries to change the subject back to Swablu, stating that she would do everything in her power to help it out. With that, Ash, Max, and Brock decide to go to the lake without May, but not before Brock hands May some medicine and bandages on a tray and tells her when to apply the medicine and bandages and tells her how to do so. May then notices that Swablu had fallen asleep, so she couldn't do any demonstrations of applying the bandages or medicine without waking it up. So Brock just had faith that she would do it correctly and went to the lake with Max and Ash before returning later to see that May was still taking care of Swablu, and the three boys decided to go to bed and leave May up to take care of Swablu all night, just as she wanted. May does in fact stay up all night taking care of Swablu, not falling asleep, and watching it intently, even starting a fire in the fireplace to make sure Swablu kept warm. The next morning, May gave it the medicine, as Brock had instructed her to do, and Brock was impressed, seeing that May continued to care for Swablu even when he woke up early to make breakfast for everyone, and May still cared for Swablu even as they were eating breakfast. Throughout the day, May carried Swablu around and watched Ash and Brock have a practice match between Brock's Lombre and Ash's Pikachu, in which Lombre and Pikachu tied. And then that night, she went to sleep with it right next to it, yet again, finally getting some sleep for herself. But she put a lamp next to herself and Swablu, so that if she woke up in the middle of the night, she could instantly see Swablu and check on it. The next morning, May then massaged Swablu's injured wing and fed it with Pikachu and Torchic, with Max observing. Swablu, Pikachu, and Torchic happened to be eating outside that morning, and therefore they saw that Ash was training with his Tailo as Tailo flew around in the sky. Swablu seemed to be very happy to see Tailo flying, almost like it was watching Tailo to make time go by faster as it waited to regain its ability to fly. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had built a little treehouse of their own in a tree, and Wobbuffet soon came out of this treehouse to see Jessie, James, and Meowth spying on Ash and the gang and Swablu. And Jessie was annoyed how long they were waiting to capture Swablu, wondering why they just couldn't capture it right now. But James reminded Jessie that they should probably wait until Swablu's wing was healed to capture it, with Meowth adding that if Swablu's wing wasn't healed, then it wouldn't be nearly as useful to Giovanni anyways. A few days later, inside Mr. Marita's cabin, Brock took off Swablu's bandage on his wing to see how it was healing up, and confirmed that Swablu had fully recovered, so he kept the bandage off permanently. Everyone was very pleased that Swablu was recovered, especially May and Miss Marita, who thanked May for doing such a good job taking care of it, stating that now it would be able to rejoin its flock soon. May thanked Mr. Marita for the compliment, and suggested that Swablu fly. Swablu was very happy to oblige, having been waiting to fly and rejoin its flock for so long, but it only ends up getting in the air for a short moment before falling down. This surprises everyone, especially Brock, who suggests that maybe he was wrong, and Swablu's wing wasn't fully healed yet, and it needed more time. Although Ash, on the other hand, simply thought that since it had been so long since it flew, Swablu may have forgot how to fly, so it just had to be taught again. So, therefore, Ash sends out his Tailo, and tells Swablu to watch Tailo fly, so it could learn how to fly as well. But, much to Ash's surprise, even though he told Swablu to join Tailo in the air when it was ready, Swablu simply shook its head, not wanting to fly. Ash and Tailo tried to encourage it to fly, as Tailo landed by Swablu, although Swablu simply ran to May in fear and hid behind her legs. Leading Brock to point out the obvious, which was that it seemed as though Swablu was now too afraid to fly, with Marita corroborating with what Brock just said, saying that it would make sense that Swablu became afraid to fly after experiencing the traumatic event involving the storm. Also adding that perhaps Swablu was too used to May taking care of it now, so it didn't want to do a lot for itself. Upon hearing all this, May began to worry that Swablu would never fly again, especially when Marita added that trauma could take a long time to sort out for a young Pokemon. Ash comforted May, though, by assuring her that Swablu would fly again, even if it did take a lot of time, stating that they would stay at Marita's place as long as it took for Swablu to fly. Hearing this, May promised to the Swablu that she would do her best to help it fly again, as Marita stated that he would locate the Swablu's flock in the meantime. He would try and find it on the preserve, so that once Swablu could fly, it could reunite with them, stating his confidence that Ash and the gang could get Swablu to fly. Max, when thinking of how to get Swablu to fly, then suggested that they should teach Swablu how to just take off the ground in the first place to start, before actually having it fly. May agreed to this and pet Swablu. In order to help Swablu learn how to take off from the ground, Ash and Pikachu proceeded to put on some fake wings. Max was skeptical of this maneuver working, as he didn't think Ash and Pikachu could do anything to try and teach Swablu how to fly, so he instead directed his attention to Marita, who was setting off to go find Swablu's flock, and asked if he'd made any progress so far, with Marita denying. Anyways, after Ash and Pikachu had properly fastened the wings on themselves, they started to run and flap their wings, and then jump in the air, telling Swablu that that's what it had to do, although now it wasn't just Max who was skeptical, but Brock and May were skeptical that this would work as well, seeing how Ash and Pikachu obviously couldn't fly, even with these wings, so it wouldn't really teach Swablu anything. Regardless of May's skepticism, she knew that Ash and Pikachu wouldn't stop trying to flap their wings if Swablu didn't at least try as well, and she didn't want to have to witness Ash and Pikachu's embarrassing wing flapping anymore, so she told Swablu to try and do just as Ash and Pikachu were doing, and so, after watching Ash and Pikachu for a bit more, Swablu does try as it begins running. And it actually manages to get up into the air, leaving May to congratulate it, but unfortunately, Swablu only stayed in the air for a second and then fell back onto the ground, therefore making Swablu all muddy since it fell straight into a mud puddle that was still left over from the storm. Yeah, that's right, that shows how bad the storm was. May started to get worried again that Swablu would never be able to fly, but just then she got one more idea that she thought would be way better than Ash's, as she sent out her Beauty Fly, and then had Swablu get on top of it. Basically, her plan was to have Swablu get up into the air, even though it wasn't flying itself, so that it could be reminded of how great it was to be up in the sky, which would hopefully motivate it to do better at actually flying. At first, when Swablu went in the air, it was afraid. So afraid that it hid its head in Beautyfly's body, although Ash and the gang encouraged it to not be afraid, as they called to it, looking up at Beautyfly and Swablu, and this motivated Swablu to lift up its head and look in awe at the beautiful sky, and it becomes happy, remembering how fun it was to fly, as Beautyfly goes around the entire cabin, up in the air. Eventually, Beautyfly and Swablu landed down on the ground as night fell, but Ash and the gang realized that Swablu still couldn't fly on its own, even though it was happy to be in the air, so they tried their best to come up with a new strategy to actually have Swablu fly independently. Suddenly, everyone was surprised when Max suggested a foolproof plan, at least that's what he called it, to get Swablu to fly, which apparently involved magic, and simply tell Swablu that some mons could only fly by using magic. He, along with the rest of the gang, were immensely tired from today, though, so they decided to go to sleep for the night and try Max's magic strategy in the morning, retiring from the table to the beds. The next morning, though, Ash and the gang, Swablu, and May's Beautyfly went outside, along with Ash's Tailo, and Max put his plan into action, lying to Swablu that some Pokemon, such as Beautyfly and Tailo, could only fly due to a special magic powder. Even though this was obviously fake, he wanted Swablu to believe this, so he had May's Beautyfly spray some Silverwind powder on Tailo. And Tailo pretends to be entirely transformed and relieved by the silver powder and fly happily into the air. Max then reaffirmed his lie that Tailo could only fly due to the powder, and suggested that Swablu take in some of the powder as well to fly. Although May wasn't too happy with this idea, not liking that Max was lying to Swablu. But Brock replied that this lie was necessary, stating that maybe Swablu, upon getting the powder on it, would immediately feel like Pokemon that could fly, and perhaps be able to fly again. Basically stating that the powder would give Swablu the confidence he needed to fly, since he would think it would actually be a magic powder. As for Swablu itself, although it was amazed by Tailo flying due to the powder apparently, it was still skeptical to go into the powder itself, and asked May if it should do this by nudging up to her, and May assured Swablu that he should try it, believing that if Brock thought it would work, then it had to work. So, Max had Beautyfly use another Silverwind on Swablu, covering it with Silverwind dust, leading it to then flap its wings, and in a matter of seconds after this, it started flying up towards Tailo, flapping its wings as hard as it could to stay up. Ash and Pikachu jumped for joy, happy that they had taught it to fly, but Max reminded Ash that their plan didn't work. It was Max's plan that worked. Regardless, Ash and Pikachu were amazed by this powder, thinking that it actually was magic and helped a person fly, so they wanted to fly, and were about to pour some powder on themselves, but then Max, May, and Brock told Ash and Pikachu the truth about how there actually was no magic, which makes Pikachu embarrassed, and Ash and Pikachu both extremely sad that they couldn't fly. While May just jumped for joy at the fact that Swablu was flying. Swablu's flying moment was then interrupted, though, as Morita suddenly came out of his cabin with his Nuzleaf and declared that after doing some research on his computer, he had managed to pinpoint the location of the Altaria flock somehow. So, with that, Ash and the gang hopped into Mr. Morita's car, not wanting to waste any time, during which they could potentially lose track of the Altaria flock, and they sped off as fast as possible in the car towards the location, which was apparently a lake. Just then, though, the trip in the vehicle was interrupted by a barrage of pin missiles hitting the vehicle's front tire, therefore making it flat, and therefore making the vehicle unable to progress towards the location. The other tires were going to get hit and flattened as well by pin missile, but Mr. Morita had saw the pin missiles coming from the forest and was able to swerve out of the way just in time, although now his vehicle had stopped. So Morita and his Nuzleaf quickly got out of the stopped car and examined the flat tire, coming to the conclusion that the car wouldn't be able to move, annoying Mr. Morita, although he stated that the lake wasn't too far by, so they could all make it on foot. Although May suggested that Swablu should fly there, since the lake wasn't that far, and Swablu could use the practice, although the rest of the gang thought that this wasn't a very good idea, since Swablu didn't have enough actual flying experience yet, and Swablu didn't think it could fly either, since, according to Max, Swablu probably thought that it needed more of the powder to fly. Max, Brock, and Ash then suggested to May that if she wanted Swablu to fly to the lake, then she should just send out her beauty fly and have Swablu fly on it, and May realized that this would probably be for the best, so that Swablu wouldn't miss out on the rest of its flock, so she called out beauty fly. But during this, she set Swablu down on the front of the car, because, she obviously couldn't hold Swablu while, sending out Beautyfly, and Swablu was currently being held by her. I don't know why she just didn't place it on the ground, but anyways, right as Swablu was placed on the car, a mechanical hand came down, having come out from the forest, and brought Swablu up, leading Swablu to get confused, as the hand then retreated back into the forest, where it was revealed that the hand had been deployed from Team Rocket's Meowth balloon, and now the hand had been reeled up with a remote control by Jessie, and now Swablu was in Jessie's hands, making her very happy, since, she really wanted Swablu more than Meowth or James, because of how soft Swablu was, and with that, Team Rocket began flying off into the woods, not thinking Ash and the gang would chase them. However, Ash and the gang had chased the hand through the forest, and saw Jessie cuddling Swablu and James thanking his Cacnea, who was already out, revealing that Cacnea was the one who had sent the pin missile to knock out the tires of Mr. Morita's car. Upon seeing Ash and the gang, Team Rocket then did their motto, as Ash and the gang demanded that they give back Swablu, although of course, Team Rocket refused, so Ash had Pikachu use Thunderbolt, but Team Rocket stopped him, reminding Ash that if Pikachu used Thunderbolt, Swablu would also be hurt, adding that Swablu would be even more hurt if the Thunderbolt ended up blasting Team Rocket off, as Swablu would get injured in the blast off as well. Knowing that Team Rocket was right, May told Swablu to use Sing instead, and as if Swablu were actually May's Pokemon, since it trusted her so much, Swablu actually obliged. Team Rocket freak out, knowing what would happen because of the Sing, as they then fall asleep. Although, before they fell asleep, James was able to order his Cacnea to use Pin Missile, so he used it right as it fell asleep, hurting all of Team Rocket, as that's who the Pin Missile was aimed for. And Team Rocket did this since the Pin Missile woke them all up, so now only Cacnea was still asleep. Although, Team Rocket were not really in the best of moods, as the Pin Missiles had struck them right in their asses. And they continued to, even when they were woken up. So, James told Cacnea to fucking quit its pin missiles, as Swablu cowered in a corner, trying to avoid the pin missiles, but James then noticed that of course Cacnea was asleep, so it couldn't stop using the attack, and one of the pin missiles then accidentally hits the Meowth balloon's burner. Since the asleep Cacnea obviously didn't have any control of where it shot the pin missiles either, causing the balloon to go up in flames. And then it starts to crash down, leading Team Rocket to go insane with fear, as do Ash and the gang, who chase after the falling Meowth balloon. As for Swablu, PTSD was triggered, as the on-fire Meowth balloon reminded it of the thunder striking the tree and knocking the tree that was on fire down on it. Seeing the balloon coming down, a panicking May tells Swablu to get the fuck out of the balloon, but Swablu's PTSD was too much for it, especially since the PTSD was now making it remember the wing injury it sustained. Just then, the fire quickly spread to the entire balloon, which in turn made the balloon go down faster, so this led Ash and the gang to simply continue chasing the falling balloon as fast as they could, and they continued to beg Swablu to get out of the balloon, but Swablu was still too afraid. May realized that it was because of both the fire and the fact that it was scared to fly that it wasn't flying out, so she continued to beg for Swablu to come out of the balloon, but also added the truth of the fake magic powder, stating that Swablu could fly without it. Swablu was soon enough motivated by this, as well as May's constant begging for it to get out of the balloon, and it manages to get up the courage to fly out of the balloon. However, Ash and the gang were terrified, as Swablu had flown out just as the balloon loudly exploded, creating a huge cloud of smoke. But, much to Ash and the gang's relief, Swablu then emerged from the smoke as the smoke disappeared, flying happily, and right into May's arms. May then congratulates Swablu, holding it up in the air, on finally being able to fly, just as Team Rocket's burning remains of the Meowth balloon crashed on the ground, with Team Rocket still inside. So, Brock, not wanting Team Rocket to actually die, even though he hated them, decided to save their lives by sending out Lombre and Mudkip, and having them use a dual water gun to extinguish the flames. Despite being saved, Team Rocket was still complaining about the crash, and upon seeing Swablu, they tried to steal it again. May and the rest of the gang, as well as Swablu itself, were very annoyed by this, so they decided to have Mudkip and Lombre use 2 more water guns to send Team Rocket blasting off. Very quickly, as Team Rocket had no chance to do anything. Ash and the gang celebrated their victory along with Mr. Narita and Nuzleaf, as Mr. Narita reminded Ash and the gang that they should head to the lake. So they did so, but they made it there by evening. So much to Ash and the gang's disappointment, they saw no flock. The flock of Altaria were already gone by this point. May was saddened on behalf of Swablu at first, but she then got happy as she realized that this would give her the opportunity to stay with Swablu a bit longer, and even asked it if it wanted to join her team, stating that if it did, then not only could they spend more time together, but they could look for the Swablu's flock together. So Swablu agreed, flying towards May, as May prepared a Pokeball, about to throw it to catch Swablu, when suddenly the Altaria flock, along with their young other Swablu, arrived and called for their friend. Hearing the calls, Swablu immediately turned away from May and began flying towards the rest of its flock, although May was hesitant to let Swablu go since she really was attached to it, so she called for it to come back. Although Swablu looked back, saddened, conflicted itself, not knowing what to do. It wanted to go back with its flock, but it also didn't want to leave May either. However, although May didn't want Swablu to go, it then told it to go on ahead to its flock, and Swablu obliged. Max questioned what the heck got into May, not understanding why she was letting Swablu go if she liked it so much, leading May to explain that Swablu's happiness was what really mattered to her, and she knew that Swablu would be happiest and best off with the rest of its flock, making Max disappointed, as he thought that Swablu would end up becoming May's Pokemon and become really good friends with all of them. May and Swablu then share one last tearful goodbye, with May admitting that she would really miss Swablu, but promises that they would always be friends. Max and May both begin to cry, but they wave goodbye to Swablu as it flies back to its flock, and they fly off somewhere into the wilderness.